council meeting Monday, October 7th to order. Roll call.
Mayor Calvin.
Here.
Councilmember Fagerly.
Here.
Maskey.
Here.
Montes. Here. Davis. Here. Alvarado.
Here.
Osmus. Here. Plowman.
Here.
Nelson. Here. 9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, are there any proposed additions or deletions to the agenda? Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would respectfully ask that we move item number 14 immediately behind item number 10, because they're all public works related items. We can discuss them at one time.
Anything else for council?
No, sir.
Motion been moved and seconded to approve the consent items as presented. Additional comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Next item is our open forum. We have Mr. John Burns here to speak.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, he did not do the consent agenda.
How about we do consent agenda first?
It's okay.
City Clerk, Ms. Thompson, consent items, please.
On the consent agenda for this evening, we have for council's approval the city council minutes of September 16th, city council special minutes of September 30th, Willmar Municipal Utilities Board minutes of September 23rd, application for exempt permit from the Glacial Ridge Curling Club, application for exempt permit Pheasants Forever, the approval of sale of 1988 fire truck, the accounts payable report September 12th through October 2nd, and for council's acceptance, the police commission minutes of May 21st, Central Community Transit Operation Board minutes of June 25th, Willmar Lakes Area CBB Board minutes of August 20th, and the monthly building report for September.
Motion made and seconded to approve the consent items. Any discussion, council? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next will be the open forum, Mr. John Burns, but also I'll remind the council that at our mini work session, we said that if we wanted items to go to staff, that we would direct those through the city administrator. So if there's something that the council would like to have answered by staff, let's direct that to the city administrator and he'll direct it to the appropriate staff member. Unless there's a different format that the council wishes to use. With that, Mr. John Burns.
John Burns, resident of Willmar. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, interested parties in Willmar and Kaneohe County. I rise to bring your attention to a very serious problem that we're having here in Kaneohe County with an anti-Islamic hate group that calls itself that's Thee, book club. It has a hate agenda directed against our Muslim brothers and sisters. It's very much like the Klan back in the day, almost 100 years ago. And that group beliefs are pretty close to what you can find in this book here that's called Understanding Islam in the Light of Christianity. That's printed here in Kaneohe County, by the way. I do not know that this group has any affiliations with any other group outside of Kaneohe County. So this is our baby, right here, in this town and in this county. And what they promote is religious intolerance against Muslims, and I fear that it will reach a point at some point where people will begin to take action. The bombing of the mosque in Bloomington, Minnesota is an example of that kind of thing. I'm talking about the people on the fringes. And if we ignore it, it doesn't go away. I want to point out that a former member of this council and a member of the county board, Steve Amon, is an ardent member of that group. The public needs to know that. I don't think he would deny it. I would urge this group, this council, to consider a resolution condemning the book club, THEE book club. If you can't bring yourselves to do that, at least I would urge that you consider a resolution condemning religious hatred, pointing out that we are all brothers and sisters, all children of God, no matter what our religious faith may be. It has no place in Willmar and in Kaneohe County. Please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have a hearing, special assessments for unpaid weed, grass, mowing, removal charges. I will open the public hearing. Mr. Brammens.
I will defer to the person that has more knowledge of this than I do.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, tonight before us is the proposal to adopt a resolution to certify the amount of unpaid weed, grass mowing charges to the county auditor for collection in 2020 for 6 various properties. Property owners were notified of tonight's hearing, and for tonight we would like to see if anyone is present to speak for or against these mowing charges, and then for the council to take appropriate action.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Staff has made the presentation. Is anybody from the public that wishes to speak? Please stand and then state your name and whether you reside within the city or outside of the city, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Kevin Halliday. I reside in the city. Tonight I'm here representing Halliday Enterprises, owners and landlords of property at 500 Charlotte Street, Southeast. This is a mowing that was conducted way back in May. And the facts are this: on May 28th, I was at the front office of City Hall, and I met Mr. Tom Rosemeyer, who had just come back from an inspection, and said that a property had a call, and rightly so, it's 10 or 12 inches tall of grass, and it needs to be mowed. And I said, well, Tom, sometimes it's better that we actually have the city letter that will get the tenants to move. So please issue the letter. And he did issue the mailing on May 29th. And the mail arrived on May 30th, as it always does, somewhere between 12:30 and 1 o'clock. I immediately took that letter and my scotch tape, as I do, because I've had other tenants. If I don't meet them, they tape it to the door that they use all the time, so they have to get involved in getting it mowed. But as I went that day, it was completely mowed. So they either mowed it on the same night that Tom talked to me on May 28th or on May 29th. And when I went by at 4 o'clock on May 28th, it was clearly in violation, far in excess of their 7-inch threshold. But they had mowed it on one of those 2 dates, and so they abated the infraction against the ordinance, and to me that concluded the matter. I drove by the property about a week later, and they mowed it. And I'm going, wow, my tenants are changing their behavior, and they're mowing it twice in 8 or 9 days. Only to learn that the city or its agent came on the property and mowed it again. And I'm objecting to this because there was not due process for them to do that. Each and every infraction in your ordinance requires a notice. You cannot have a blanket notice for property violations. Tenants, when they have no vested interest in the property, never are going to be the greatest caretakers. But the city's got to perfect their system whereby each notice that goes out, within a few days, they need to check on the remedy. And when landlords receive notices and we take corrective action, all those violations, and there are repeated ones, I have 7 homes in this city, and once or twice I get 1 a year. But each and every infraction, each and everything has to have a new notice, and once it's mowed, that abates the matter. When they came back 7 days later, it may have been looking scraggly again. These are people that, for some reason, let it go to be 8, 9, 10, 11 inches. And then they must set their lawnmower in the highest wheel bearing on the deck and mow it at 4.5 inches or so. Where most of us in this room will mow our lawns at 3 inches and constantly take care of it. Even so, it's not a matter of fact. They mowed it down from 10 inches down to about 4.5 inches. And what it looked like a week later, I don't know. I don't know what the agent saw when they came back. But again, I ask for your consideration to reject this assessment because my tenants did not have that due notice.
So you're asking to have the fee of $137.89 waived?
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Please state your name and whether you reside within the city or outside of the city.
My name is Nathan Pitt. I reside outside of the city. I own properties in Willmar. The one in question was 1109 Olean Ave Southeast, which I purchased July 30th, 2019. I received a letter in the mail stating that there was going to be an assessment on my taxes for mowing charges. And I found out through calling the city that it was from August of 2018. When I bought the property, in the purchase process, I hired a title company to do a search on it. There were no liens or assessments at the time. When I took possession of it, and a month later got a letter in the mail stating that there was going to be charges assessed to my taxes for $196.13 or something.
15 cents.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think I talked to the title company. They confirmed that they weren't there when they did their title check before I purchased it. I purchased it. They agreed that the previous owner, the seller, should be the ones paying for that. So I'm asking that you waive those fees.
Okay. Anyone else with statements back?
I think that's it.
Okay. Anybody else from the public that wishes to speak? Anybody else from the public that wishes to speak? With that, I'll close the public hearing and move it to council. I have a couple questions for staff. On the property at 500 Charlotte Street, Mr. Grammons, would you like me to go directly to Ms. Thompson?
Depends on what your question is, Mr. Mayor.
My question is, was due process followed on the 137.89 as stated, or is it in fact that the law was not followed?
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, I would, defer that to the department that maybe have issued the notices and sent the remedial team out to mow the grass, because I don't know that the clerk's office would have that information. Mr. Christensen, do you have any information that you could provide on this?
Mayor, members of the council, I don't know if I have additional information. The information I have to go off of is simply that when a notice is called in or requested or a complaint is called in, we check the length of the grass. If it's longer than the 7 inches, or if it's obvious we don't get out and measure it, then we send the letters out, and they have, I think it's a week to mow at that point. After that week is up, we go check again, and if it has not been mowed, then we schedule our crews to go mow it. On this particular property, I don't know the dates of the letters, and have to call them up, recall them, but I don't have them in front of me.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, I guess in that process, that when the mowing crew showed up, I'm assuming for the second mowing, that if they were confronted with a lot where the grass exceeded, the maximum requirement, they would have not known the week before it got mowed. They just show up and they know that the grass is too long. So, given the fact that it was mowed and then it grew again, and the property owner did not take care of the grass, to mow it back down to acceptable level, our crews would just say, I was sent out here to mow the grass because it was too long. I got out here and guess what? It's too long. So they just go ahead and mow it. So I would say it, may be bad timing, but the crews did what they were asked to do. And as logic would flow, I would say that this would be if it follows the timeline Mr. Christensen's saying, that they go out, a week later and check, and they found it too long, so I would say it would be justified.
Is the 137, is that a one-time or is that two-time? I thought I was understanding that that's a one-time mowing.
Yes.
One.
Additional questions on 500 Charlotte Street from council? Okay, then I want to go to the 1109 Arena. My question there is that if the property was mowed when the tenant or when the owner did not own the property, why weren't they told when they did the search about that? And I know that is currently being done by Camden County. If he did a title search to make sure that it was free and clear and nothing was up, why is that done in 2018? Why didn't we do that in 2018 and wait until 2019 to be on?
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, in order for the city to notify anybody, historically you would get a request, you'd get a certificate from an organization, to say, do you have any pending debt against it? And if you don't get that certificate, we don't respond. We don't even know the land's being transferred. So the bottom line is, if we don't get that, we can't provide the information. And in just in discussing, we have no record of that, of a request ever coming in. So somebody dropped the ball, but it wasn't on the city side, because we would respond.
Okay, those are the only questions I have. So staff, do you have any questions on 1109? Okay. With that, council, what are your wishes?
This would just be a question for Attorney Dr. Scott. In matters such as this, is there any type of reciprocity in the state of Minnesota regarding fees that are to be assessed to, say, an owner of a property, if it's actually a previous owner of a property? Is there any state statute that talks about reciprocity or no?
Mayor, Councilmember Plowman, no, there's not. As the city administrator mentioned, in most cases, if a title company is involved in the insuring a real estate transaction, they will know to check with the city office, because there are governmental charges that can be liens on the property that would not show up on a title search at the county recorder's office. So I guess it's sort of just doing, as a purchaser or as a title company, insuring title after the purchase. That's just one of the steps of the due diligence to ensure that there's clean title. And it sounds like that wasn't done here. But no, there's nothing in statute that would protect a subsequent purchaser from liens against the property that don't show up in the title search if they're validly established by ordinance.
Thank you. So then would it be fair to say that it would be incumbent on the title search company to do their due diligence and to find that? And if not found, then the financial encumbrance be on them?
If there was a title company involved, I mean, yes, I think unless they have put a blanket exception in the title policy or something, but I think typically the title company would take that step and contact the city offices and ask if there are outstanding charges that could be liens on the property. So one way or the other, I'd say the onus is on the purchaser or the title company ensuring the title acquisitions.
So then the proper procedure would be for the purchaser who hired the title company to then remedy that with the title company.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Councilman Nelson.
Just a point of clarification, when do these liens get recorded? So if we approve this resolution tonight, won't these become liens on the property once the resolution is done? So I'm just still curious with why it didn't happen last year.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, once a year, these liens are certified to the county auditor, and it's typically this time of year. If this resolution is approved tonight, I will bring this over to the county auditor's office tomorrow or Wednesday, and they will put record on, and it will be against the property taxes due and payable in 2020. A property owner can come and pay those prior to that time.
My question is, why wasn't it done last year?
Apparently, it was done after the timing that we received the notice from the engineer's office for who we could assess. I believe Mr. Pitt stated in August of 2018 was when.
Told by the city that it was August of 18 when they were incurred.
Okay, so if they were incurred August of 18, then, I don't know, Sean, do they send out a notice telling them to pay within a certain time, and if they don't, then it comes to be placed on their taxes? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I believe that's what the letter says. I believe that's what the letter says, that it gives a time frame to pay, or it will show up on your tax bill.
So my follow-up question to Councilmember Nelson's question is, when did we submit that to the county?
Last year?
Right.
That I can't answer now. I would have to check our files when it was approved last year at the council meeting. Typically it's done in October.
Mr. Gramitz, were we aware that these two individuals were coming today?
I think I was aware one was gonna come about a month and a half or 2 months ago. But I was not aware of the other individual.
So it's concerning to me that we don't have the information when we knew that the potential for the questions could be asked tonight by council and by our citizens. And we don't have the answer. We don't have answers to these questions. Councilman Erasmus.
In regards to the 1109 Olena Avenue property, I just feel like this homeowner did his due diligence. He purchased his property. He had a company that was supposed to do the background. I have to believe that if we did it in August, that should have come before us. Like now it's October. That would have been half of August, all of September, and into October that we, as a city, I feel should have been able to have gotten that if we were going to put a lien on that property. I just think if I was a homeowner and I had purchased a property and this had happened when I didn't live there, I just don't feel like he should be responsible for that.
You could make that as a motion if you chose to remove that one. It would take a second, and it would take the council to pass.
I'll make a motion to remove 1109 Olena Avenue Southeast.
Looking for a second. Seeing and hearing none, council, what are your wishes?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution certifying the amount of the unpaid weed grass mowing removal charges to the county auditor for collection in 2020 as listed. Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the resolution certifying the amount of unpaid weed, grass, mowing, removal charges to the county auditor for collection in 2020. Discussion. Councilmember Neske.
For the two that we've heard about this evening, are we under any time constraint that this has to be passed at this point in our council year?
Mr. Kravitz?
Yes, there's a time limit to get it onto the tax roll, so November 15th.
November?
So, the county has to process it to get it on to the tax bills to have it incorporated into the bill so it goes out after the first of the year.
So we'll have it in the council meeting. I guess I would offer a friendly amendment that exactly. I would offer a friendly amendment that the two properties that are disputed, since we can't verify timeframes from our own staff, and that we reevaluate those two properties at a later date before the November deadline.
The maker of the motion is not on the bill.
Then I would make a motion to amend it.
Did I read that right? I saw you shaking your head.
I think we did hear an answer on the 500 Charlotte Street, and I think we also had a suggestion that this other one should go back to the title company so that is that what you want clarified?
I don't know if I heard. No, I don't know if I heard that we could verify the dates in which we voted and then that mailed over was done, etc. At least I didn't hear that.
I think both the landlord and our staff indicated that the grass was long, even though it had been mowed, and so it was in need of mowing, and there was a notice that was sent out, and so.
But it was cut.
But that's kind of a subjective question with, did our staff do our job or not? That our department head is saying that they did their job. And the other one, granted, I don't think the new owner should have to deal with this, but we did go out and mow that property. It was an expense to the city, and I think it was provided that they should go back to the title company to see if we erred, and the title company can prove that we erred, then they can come back again.
You can offer it as a separate motion.
I understand that.
What are you asking? What do you want to do?
He wants to remove the two and give staff time to come back and approve the other four tonight.
Within our time frame, of course. Because I heard, and I can just, you can defer it to our staff, but I thought I heard them say, generally speaking, that's what we do. I don't think I heard specifics about this particular incident.
Mr. Grammons, can you clarify that for us?
I wasn't there, but what I'm understanding from the department head, our process is to mail the letter and go out a week later. We heard from the property owner that when he got the letter, he went there and it was mowed. And if anybody remembers what the early spring, early summer was like, you could mow 2 times a week, if not maybe every other day. And so when the crew went out to mow the grass, they probably a week later, they came upon grass that would have been, in all likelihood, long, because that's what the weather was like. And so the crew would come out and look at it and say, it's a week later, we measured it, it's long, so they mowed it. So the crew did, I think, what they were supposed to do in the time that they normally would do it. The issue is was it 14 inches long or an inch over or half inch over? If the crew looked at it and went, it needs to get mowed, they did what they needed to do. So, I feel for the property owner in that instance, but in typical process of getting the lawns mowed that have been identified. You want to give the property owner opportunity to take care of it themselves, you give them a week. In this case, it regrew long enough to be considered to be remote again.
So you would consider that was due process in both of them in that case?
Yep, I would. I mean, if it was a dry summer and they showed up, or, a week later and it only grew a half an inch, the crew would look at it and say, well, it's in compliance, we're not gonna mow it. But when they show up, they look at it. Somebody made a determination on the crew that it needs mowing, which is what they're supposed to do when they get out there.
Mr. Hillary, can you go back to the podium, please? Yes. So, according to what you told us, you stated that you arrived on the property on or about the 29th or 30th of May. And at that point, the lawn had been mowed.
Correct.
Did you notify city staff of that? I know it's not a requirement, I'm just asking if you did.
I did not. That maybe should be the requirement with a phone number directly to the staff involved to say that the matter's been abated. But when I go to a mowed lawn, there's no sense putting a notice on the tenant's door.
Thank you. We have a motion that's been made and seconded. Additional discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Fagerly. Maskey. Schwantes. Davis. Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
No.
Plowman.
No.
Nelson.
Aye.
4 ayes, 3 nays.
The resolution fails.
I'm sorry, I missed you. You were an aye. Okay. So 5 ayes, 3 nays.
Resolution passes. Next, we have Public Works Safety Committee report of September 18th. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Works Safety Committee met September 18th in the conference room at the City Office Building. All members were present, including myself, Councilwoman Osmus, Councilwoman Nelson, and Councilman Alvarado. We called the meeting to order at 5:15, and we opened it up for public comment. Nobody was there. I should also mention joining us was our fire chief and our city engineer, along with our public works superintendent, Gary Manzer. We took public safety update. We had from staff fire department statistics for the month of August. Those should be included in the packet. If anybody has any questions regarding the fire statistics, your opportunity to ask Chief Hansen is now. Without any comments about that, we'll move on to our next item regarding fire marshal grant. Motion was made and seconded to approve the application and the acceptance of a fire marshal grant for a gear dryer. The motion carried, and I'm going to enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve a resolution applying to approve application and acceptance of a state fire marshal grant for a gear washer for the fire department. Discussion, Councilmember Nelson.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have seconded it as is. If I remember correctly, this is only the application. We have not received the grant yet. Is that correct? So it shouldn't be the acceptance of the grant, it's only the application of the grant.
I believe that the way we've been doing them is we've been doing the application, we've been approving the application and the acceptance so that when the grant is received, they can move forward. But before money is spent, it has to come back. I believe it to be correct. Mr. Graham, if we could do clarification, either from yourself or the finance director on that.
That sounds like a logical process to me, sure.
So we do, this is the way we do it. This is what we've been doing it.
I apologize, okay. I did second.
That wasn't changed. You're right, it didn't used to be that way. Motion been made and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly. 8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next item for discussion was the Western Interceptor Project final. We discussed the final payment for the Western Interceptor Project. Motion was made and seconded to adopt the as-bid budget, accepting the project and authorizing final payment in the amount of $81,325.31 to R.L. Larson Excavating for that portion of the Western Interceptor Storm Sewer Project. And I'll enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve a resolution to adopt an as-bid budget for the Western Interceptor Stormwater Project. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis. Aye. Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly. Neski.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes.
The next item, thank you, was for discussion was the Eagle Lake Sewer Repair professional.
Councilman Plowman, I believe that you need to accept the project and authorize final payment. There was actually two motions there that we needed.
Okay, I apologize because my notes are not reflecting that. Oh. All right, and so then authorizing final payment in the amount of $81,325.31, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the project and authorize final payment in the amount of $831,325.31. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Davis. Aye. Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly. Neski.
Aye.
Schwantes. 8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to do a little bit better with this one. The next item was the Eagle Lake Sewer Repair Professional Services Agreement. We discussed a little bit at length the Eagle Lake sewer system and a junction of pipe that is going to need reconstruct, I believe, on the southeast side of the lake. Is that correct? Near the public access. Motion was made and seconded to approve the professional services agreement with Bolton and Mink for the Eagle Lake Sewer Repair Project, and to authorize signatures on the agreement in the amount of $30,300. And is that just one motion? Or is that two? Okay, and I will enter that as one motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve a professional services agreement with Bolton and Mink for the Eagle Lake Sewer Repair Project and authorize signatures in the amount of $30,300. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
Neski.
Aye.
Schwantes. Davis. 8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 6 was regarding project number 1901-B, a second change order, therefore the title change order number 2. And I am actually going to, because I don't have a description of exactly where the project is, I'm going to call on our city engineer to just briefly tell us what that item was and the location of town that it's in.
Would you like to leave that to the city administrator?
Actually, yes, and I stand corrected. Mr. Administrator, could you please help us out with that?
I think Mr. Christensen would be the appropriate person to explain.
Thank you, to define it. Project number 1901B is the reconstruction, affectionately called Stub Street reconstruction. So it's 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th southeast from the south end to either Becker or the frontage road. And this particular change order is a result of central utility conflicts and a drop manhole that will need to place at the intersection of 14th and Drop House.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. We discussed that just briefly regarding what happens in the event of change orders as they come about on these street projects, as they try to maintain timely work on the streets, and so there was some good information that we were given as well. Following that, a motion was made and seconded to accept change order number 2 in the amount of $11,217 for project 1901-B, and I'll enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept change order number 2 in the amount of $11,217. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Bagley. Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes. Davis. Alvarado.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
And that resolution passes as well. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sticking to our agenda for that day, the next couple items were just for information only. We received for discussion the topic of potentially banning private snow haulers from depositing snow onto the old airport runway. And the subtopics of this conversation included the fact that we have less available area for storage this year, or this coming winter season. We have little to no control over what is hauled and or deposited at that location. Other discussions regarding the fairness of how to determine who is and who is not allowed to dump there besides the city, and the fact that it's not consistent with other policies that we have in place, nor other policies that other municipalities have in place. So this is something that we discussed at the committee level, and there's still, Public Works is still going to be kicking the idea around, and I believe it's going to be coming back to our future agenda to be discussed a little bit further. The next informational item that we talked about was the residential parking during the winter season. As you recall, this was an issue that came up last year, and we have, I guess, no reason to believe that we're not going to receive any snow this year, although we would like to believe that. We're trying to stay proactive and get ahead of the issue. And so our committee discussed, and we received the discussion of this topic regarding concerns and obstruction of snow removal operations by city snowplows. And within that topic, we discussed parking on one side of the street versus no parking in total during snow events, or during non-snow events, just during season, which was also the next item, the discussion of seasonal no parking, also the discussion of time-restricted parking during certain seasons and or snow events, and lastly, the level of service overall that we're expecting the city to provide, and that the residents have come to expect from our Public Works Department with regards to snow removal. That being a pretty large topic and lengthy topic, it was a good discussion, and some good ideas came from that, and that idea also was brought back to the superintendent and our Public Works Director, and I believe they are also currently in the process of refining that discussion and bringing it back to a soon but future Public Works meeting, so that we can discuss this before the, well, we'll talk optimistically, before the winter season arrives. And with that, that was the end of the discussion at this Public Works meeting, so I would make a motion to file these minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to file the minutes of Public Works Public Safety meeting on September 18th. Discussion. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Councilman Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is one last topic, and this was a meeting that our Public Works Committee had actually tonight prior to this meeting. And the main reason for this is the seasonality and the time frame of this project. And this project is with regards to the east side drainage. And the project number is 1902-A. And
Councilman Plowman.
yeah.
Can we just reference 14A for those that are watching on the agenda?
Okay, yeah, I do apologize. This was on the standard agenda. This was item 14A that was requested that it be moved to right behind, to immediately follow the previous Public Works meeting. Anyways, during this discussion and during this meeting that we had prior to the meeting that we are currently at, we discussed 1902-A, and I'll go to our city administrator to direct us regarding specific details about this project.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, this was a project that was, I think, talked about at the City Council level for probably the last 18 months. It has gone through a change in design and also a change in the funding source. Early on, it was going to be a standard project. We included stormwater projects in the local option sales tax authorization. And so what you're going to see here is a project that was initiated last year and went through March of this year. That funding will come from the standard budget of Public Works. And then after the date of the authorization of local option sales tax, the funding for this project will be from the sales tax revenue. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is as stated by Mr. Plum, is that the time is of the essence on this to get phase 1 done. There are anticipated to be 3 phases, so 2 more are coming. And if we go back, it's still in process of determining when those phases will start and what they will include. But we've got the engineering accomplished in this first phase. And so all we have is construction in phase 2 and phase 3. It is yet to determine when phase 2 stops and phase 3 begins and what year and the details of the actual projects. So what you have before you are 3 action items in essence. One is to award the east side drainage improvement project to Crow River Construction in the amount of $52,321. Then we have an as-bid budget, which part of that budget, it'll have to be redone, so part of it comes out of departmental funds, and then part out of the option sales tax. And then the third thing to approve is the amendment to the professional services contract with Bolton and Mink in the amount of $43,500. That's, again, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. All the engineering has been done, so that's the whole package. So that's why it shows up, here in phase 1. I think the original amount was probably less, than the 43, an amount less than 43. So we're approving a higher amount because they did all of the work for phase 1, 2, and 3. So those are the 3 items that are before you.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Okay, so with that, we have 3 action items. And the first action item that was motioned on was to award the contract to Crow River Construction in the amount of $52,321. And I'll make that motion now.
Second. Motion made and seconded to approve contract to Crow River Construction in the amount of $52,321. Discussion. Councilmember Fairley.
I just have a question. This is the planned unit development over southeast part of Willmar?
Yeah, I would defer that to our administrator.
I know where it is, so.
Yes.
Now, I've heard that the owner of the association has put in a shut-off valve. Have you seen that?
Members of the council, if I may, I've not seen it. We talked about that as an option, but that was a year and a half or 2 years ago. I don't think that was ever put in. If it was, it's no news to me.
I've been told by a couple of people that they did put it in. So how does that affect this project? Because it doesn't allow any of the water from the city streets to go to their property.
It changes a number of things because it's a public system that someone can work to without public knowledge. So I'll have to check into that and see what's going on.
Well, sooner than later.
Absolutely.
I have a hard time proving all this stuff until I know.
If it's put in where they talked about, where we talked about it a couple of years ago, if it was put in place there, this portion of the project, this phase 1, will have no effect on that. It'll effectively make that device null and void. It won't be used for its intended if they put it in where they originally talked.
I think it
But
needs to be
I'll check
checked.
on that, for sure.
Somebody down here has their hand up. I'll go Councilman Nelson, followed by Schwantes.
Thank you, Mayor Calhoun. When we were meeting, we talked about the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and I think it would be helpful for the council to hear what phase 1 is and what phase 2 and what phase 3 might be. So that's my question.
I would defer that to the engineering department.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Nelson, phase 1 is a, albeit small portion of this project. What it does is it changes out a few, or actually it's 3 or 4 storm structures, catch basins and manholes to collect water. And it actually reverses the flow of a couple sections of pipe, connects a couple of catch basins and storm structures that were not connected before. And the idea here is to help eliminate water that was post this development from entering this pond or this development. So this is the first phase to put some of these structures in the ground yet this fall, and get some of that taken care of in order to start converting that water to energy. That's phase 1. Phase 2 and 3, I know.
Mr. Christensen, could you use a microphone?
You hear it? It's on.
Oh, okay. Do I need to start over?
Thank you. No.
All right, so phase 2 and 3, I don't know yet if we're going to have 2 or 3 phases. So I will say future phases will continue that process of additional storm structures and additional piping to virtually eliminate, I would say, or the idea is to get rid of all the water entering that pond system as a private pond system, and from collecting and gathering any water that would have been developed after this development went in. And so any of the public streets that enter this pond, the idea is to eliminate that and reroute that water to a different location separately from going through the system. And so I don't know yet whether it'll be 2 or 3 phases, but future phases will include the additional piping and additional storm structures to accomplish that.
So in phase 1, you talked about the intersection of 24th and Oxford Drive Southeast. But 25th Street down by Nelson International always has water standing to it. I'm just wondering, will this first phase affect that, or will we need to be doing something in addition to that for that area?
Councilmember Nelson, could be both. This first phase does have catch basins or structures in that intersection, right at that intersection. So it may take care of what we need to in that section. If it proves that it does not, then we'll have to look additionally at tweaking that area to make sure that is taken care of.
Councilman Schwantes.
I'll pass it.
Thank you. Councilman Plum, I have a question. So it says the cost anticipated is $172,613. Is that for all the projects or just this one project?
I believe that is for this initial project. However, that budget figure, I believe, has been amended, and we will be addressing that. But if I'm incorrect, we can check with our city administrator.
I'm going to say you're correct. And if you're not, I'll correct that next meeting.
Councilman Nelson.
I think if I heard correctly, this includes all of the engineering and phase 1.
Correct. Phase 1 and all engineering for, as Mr. Christensen said, future phases, maybe 2, might be 3.
The reason I asked the question is because if we add the 52 plus the 43, it doesn't come to 172.
Correct.
I mean, you know, we're at a little bit of disadvantage because we weren't privy to the conversations.
Right. And I do believe our second resolution may speak to that. And that would be adopting the amended as-bid budget. And if I'm correct, that's in the amount of $110,060.
Councilmember Nelson.
So when we were having the discussion, if I understand correctly, it's the two figures together that we're approving tonight, because the rest of the engineering was approved last September, correct? So it'd be the 43.5 and the 52.3 that we're being asked to approve tonight.
Correct. I'm going to assume that the Bolton and Mink original contract, that this is, that what you're approving tonight is in addition to that, which is found in the amended contract with Bolton and Mink. Is that correct, Mr. Christensen?
Mayor, members of the council, let me try to clarify this a little bit. The budget, as you see in front of you, is the total budget that includes the original engineering for the original scope. And it includes the amendment of $43,500 that takes us to the second scope, the new scope for the project. So it includes all engineering that has previously been done and the amendment for the new engineering for the project. It also includes the $52,321 from Bill River. So the budget in front of you, total dollars are correct. What you're approving tonight, in addition to the total budget, within that total budget is $43,500 for the amendment for the engineering services and $52,300 for construction. I tried to do it in one motion, and I'm seeing now that was maybe, sorry about that.
Councilmember Palmer, what are you introducing?
Okay, if my math is correct, and please somebody help me do the math and correct this if I'm mistaken, because I'm doing this on the fly. But I have an as-bid budget amended to the amount of $95,821.
In the second, Councilmember Alvarado, that's your understanding as well?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a resolution to award a contract to Clove River Construction, and that has been motioned and seconded. All in favor of the, I'm sorry, Councilmember Yeski.
If I look at this, can you tell me how much total professional services we've paid for this project? Including if we were to pass this today. Am I looking at 110.60 plus another 52?
I believe 52 is the contractor cost, and so you could take 52,000 minus the 172,613. That would be the number we come up with what we paid for the engineering. I'm just guessing because I've been briefed on any of this.
Mayor, members of the council, if I may, $110,060 is total professional services. From the left side to the bottom of the column.
The 110 includes this current resolution?
That 110 is the original agreement with Bolton Mink for the original scope plus $43,500.
So it's 143,000.
Nope, it's 110,000. That includes the $43,500.
Got it, okay.
So roughly $65,000 was the original contract. We're adding $43,000 to that for a total of $110,000.
And we are expecting that the work of this is going to exceed $52,000. I mean, that's what I'm looking at phase one. Phase two, I would assume, has more construction dollars tied to that, and we won't be paying any more to the services.
That's the intent, correct?
Additional questions, additional comments or questions from the council to the question? Roll call.
Councilmember Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson. Aye. Hagerly. Yeski. Schwantes. Davis. Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The final action, because we changed the professional services contract with Bolton Mink, we do need to make a formal action to amend that professional services contract, and I will make that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve an amendment for professional services with Bolton and Maine. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Bagerly. Neski. Schwantes. Davis. Alvarado. Osmus. Plowman.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Councilman Fowler, I think we need to adopt an as-bid budget. And the as-bid budget would be a grand total of $172,613. Because the first thing we did is we awarded the contract to Kroger for construction.
I think we've already done.
You did all of them? Did two together?
No,
The budget was amended. Okay.
With that, I would move to file the minutes of this meeting.
Motion made, seconded, to file the minutes of the meeting that was held right prior to this meeting. Discussion. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion does carry. Next is Finance Committee report, September. Councilmember.
Just so we get the records clear, did you amend the original motion to include the as-bid budget in your first motion? Or did?
That should have been the second motion. There's 3 motions.
Right. We only have 2 rows down here.
There was only two that, there was only two that I had, but I thought I missed out.
We actually need the third as-built.
We need the as-built that I mentioned of 170. 172,613.
Okay, I would enter the motion to accept the amended as-bid at 172,613.
Second.
Motion been made second. City Clerk Thompson, are you with us?
Same.
Okay. Okay, the question is, what was the second motion? The first motion we did was to accept the, award the contract to Kroger Construction. That was the first motion. And we passed that one by roll call. Then we went to approval of the amendment for professional services with Bolton and Mink.
And roll call.
No, we didn't. And, I mean, we got a number of the council members saying that, we have the city clerk, who is the recorder of the meeting, saying the same thing.
I think we talked about it, but we just kind of.
It was discussed, but there was no motion to it.
Kind of blended into the next issue.
Let's take a recess, 5-minute recess. Session, Councilmember Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to make a motion to approve the amended professional services contract, the amended as-bid budget in the amount of $172,613.
The motion has been made and seconded. This is a resolution, discussion by the council. Roll call.
Councilmember Fagerly. Meski. Schwantes. Davis. Alvarado. Osmus. Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson. 8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Ball.
There being no further action at that meeting, and I guess we don't have minutes, but what's the proper procedure? Can I ask our city administrator or legal counsel what the proper procedure is to close this portion of the discussion and move away from me?
The minutes will be prepared and they'll be submitted next time for formal acceptance.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Councilmember Ballman yields to Councilmember Nelson to go over the Finance Committee report for September 19th.
Thank you, Mayor Calvin. The Finance Committee met at 5:15 on Thursday, September 19th in Conference Room 1 at City Office Building. Council members Nelson, Fagerly, Plowman, and Osmus were in attendance. Also was in attendance was Finance Director Okens, Fire Chief Frank Hansen, and David Early of West Bergen Ice Shoes. We called the meeting to order and there were no public comments. And our first item of action was to replace a fire department vehicle, which is a motion. The current fire department pickup, which is a 2011 Dodge Ram, has a mechanical issue of a blown lifter causing the truck to run on only 7 cylinders. Mechanics at the city garage stated that it would cost approximately $1,700 to $2,000 to fix. In speaking with Mills Ford, they stated that this is a very common issue with this pickup and that parts are back ordered currently. When speaking with Schweeters Chevrolet, they stated they would give us a trade-in value of $14,000 as is and $15,000 if the issue was fixed. It is staff's recommendation not to spend the money on repair. If council chooses to wait until next year to replace it and trade this pickup in, the trade value will decrease by $3,000 to $5,000. 2 quotes were received for the 2020 Chevrolet Tahoe, one from Schweeters of Willmar for $40,100, less trade-in for a net vehicle price of $26,100. And the other quote was via the state contract, which was $37,658 with no trade-in option. Other expenses that need to be added include graphics for $900, emergency lights and installation of equipment $1,000, and miscellaneous items $2,000. Using this Schweeters quote for the total cost would be $36,000. Since this is an unbudgeted for this year, it is proposed that the funds would come from unspent monies from the 2019 CIP projects in the fire department budget. It was then moved by Councilmember Plowman and seconded by Councilmember Osmus to recommend that the new 2020 Chevrolet Tahoe be purchased through Schweeters Chevrolet for $26,100 with a total cost of $36,000 after adding on the other required equipment, and I will enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Councilmember Nesky.
The 2019 budget, the CIP budget, what are all the projects paid for and there are excess dollars, or are there going to be projects that might not be able to be happening in 2019?
Very curious.
All of the 2019 CIP projects for the fire department are complete, and we do have excess money to cover this expense.
Additional discussion. Roll call.
That's actually just a motion, but if you want a roll call, you can.
Is it a motion or a resolution? Because we're spending money and it's unappropriated money, we're moving money. Moving money generally takes a resolution. Roll call.
Councilmember Metzger.
Aye.
Schwantes. Aye. Davis. Aye. Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson. Aye. Bagley.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. Our next item was also a resolution to adopt the revised purchasing policy. Staff presented the proposed purchasing policy, which was updated to reflect Minnesota State Statute 471-345, Uniform Municipal Contracting Law. This statute was changed in 2018 to address the cost of inflation since 2008. The recommendations would basically change the policy to follow Minnesota Statute 471.345. This way, as the state changes the statute, the policy would automatically change and the council would not have to take action to amend. It was noted that the limits have not changed. It was moved to recommend and seconded to introduce the resolution to adopt the revised purchasing policy as presented, and I will enter that motion now.
Second.
Resolution has been introduced and seconded to adopt the revised purchasing policy. Discussion. Councilmember Nelson.
I would like to call on our administrator. We took our time with this one and had 2 things, and I think it would be important if anybody has any questions for him, just to review the actual changes and the difference between quotes and bids, I believe, was what we spent most of our time on. That's okay.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, as stated earlier, that the state statute had changed in 2018. The difference between the city policy and the state statute was that anything over 100,000 to 175,000 would require the city to spend time to prepare bid specifications and advertise and solicit sealed bids and go through that whole process. If we're looking for efficiency and speed in government, this change in our purchasing policy would meet that. It would speed up, purchases probably by 2 months. And it would take less time, or not just less time, it would take less money and effort and to achieve the results that we desire. Okay, so the difference between the three amounts that the state statute allows us to follow is that anything under $25,000 can be purchased over the counter. So you can buy a $24,000 car if you wanted to, just over the counter, go to whomever you want to go to. Anything over $25,000 to $175,000, we're required to have 2 quotes. And you go out and solicit, tell people what you want. You get 2 quotes for those items from 2 different vendors, and you're required to retain those quotes in the file for a year to prove that you went out and you got quotes on that particular purchase. Anything over $175,000 requires plans and bids and specifications, and then you advertise it, and you have to then you give time for the responses to show up, and then you open up your sealed envelope and you pick out the low bid, and you're off to the races. So from my perspective, things cost more now than they did in 2008, and what the state did was account for that increase, that inflationary increase in that statute, and I would recommend that we follow the state by reference, the state statute by reference. I think a city attorney would uphold the same concept that if you put numbers in your policies and ordinances, after a few years they may be out of date, so then you got to go back and redo them. So by adopting by reference, if the state says in 3 years from now we're going to adjust it for inflation again, you don't have to go back, and it's already done. You just accepted whatever they do. The other item in the purchasing policy was the lower limits for the city administrator and department heads, that they can acquire things without authorization and then come back and tell the city council what they did. That has not changed. That's still at $25,000 for the city administrator, and I believe it's $5,000 for department heads. So that not changed. That's not in state statute. That is something that's local here, and so the only thing that we're really doing is just the over-the-counter, the quotes, and the state and the actual sealed bid process. So if you have any questions, the city attorney would more than be happy to answer those.
Councilman Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I like the idea of mirroring the state. However, I don't know that our jurisdiction has the same pistons that, let's say, the state has for income. If the iron range is doing well and we're not doing well and we can't afford the increases, is there some sort of checks and balance in there where we might say, hey, right now it's not good for our community to be doing this? Or do we just go with it and make it work?
Okay, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, this is a process. What you're approving is a process. It does not take away the city council's right to decide that this is a good time or bad time to do a project, or buy a vehicle, or do whatever you want to do, playground. That decision still rests with the city council. All this does is it outlines whether you get quotes, or get bids, or buy it over the counter. That's all this does. So whether the Iron Range is doing well, or we're not doing so well, you still have total control of whether you buy whatever you're gonna get quotes on. That's not changed with this. Okay.
I understand that, but it's the limits, is that what changes?
Right.
Limits that, let's say you have access to or whatever, that changes, and maybe we're not at a point where we can allow those limits to be increased. That's what I'm saying.
Well, the difference is this department head would come to the city council, say, I want to buy a fire truck for $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you agree that we need to replace the fire truck, and so you allow the fire chief to go out and prepare plans and specs and go out for sealed bids and receive them and open them up and say, okay, here's the low bid, okay? That process is still there, whether it's $35,000 that you authorize us to go out for playground equipment, then we can go directly to the playground equipment providers and say, give us a quote, and we'll bring that quote back to you and say, do you want to still buy it or not? So the decision always rests with the council on whether you want to buy anything. This just sets up when do you get quotes and when do you get bids. It's just the framework to which you would work under.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Councilman Maskey.
The difference between a sealed bid and a quote, is my understanding, is there's a restriction on communication, most likely between bidders. They don't know what's in a sealed bid, I would assume.
Correct.
When you do this, I know it says it says it requires 2 quotes. Is that a minimum?
Yes.
Of 2 quotes? Because I think you can easily get into, I could see this playing out where 2 is faster, let's do that. But if you get a feeling that both of those quotes are high, I don't want to, and the intuition should say you probably should seek out more than 2. And so I guess for me, I would look at this and it's just a minor thing, but if it said it requires a minimum of 2 quotes, so you know that you can go beyond that. Because I could see that there could be, not that it would happen in Willmar, but there could be some collusion or malfeasance accusations between people that are quoting on things. I don't think that would happen, but if it would, I would think you would instinctively want more than 2 quotes. But a minimum of 2 quotes, I would.
Yeah, a minimum. And quite honestly, you can go out and not find another comparable provider of that product, and you end up with 1 quote. And you write that down. You know, I went to 5 businesses, and only 1 company has this thing. And so you write it down and you put the quote in the file and you go, that's as good as it gets. Now, you may be able to find another provider in California or, but the fact remains is if you can only get 1. I mean, I guarantee you we've had construction projects where only 1 contractor bid. And so quotes are no different. The other thing that I recommend that the department heads do is that even though $25,000 is the limit, the low limit for getting quotes, I always say if you see a $5,000 item, go out and get at least 2 quotes. I mean, I'm not saying go out and get quotes for hammers. Go to the hardware store, buy a hammer. But $5,000 is still a lot of money, and you should try and spend the least as possible to obtain the product that's desired. So, even small amounts. My recommendation for all departments is still go and get quotes. If you can get 2, great. If you can get 3, that's even better. But the minimum is 2 suggested. But you do get caught with only sometimes with 1.
Would that language change the resolution?
Mayor, Councilmember Miskey, reading the revised purchasing policy, the policy simply incorporates the statute, the Uniform Contracting Law. That law does state specifically that for purchases over 25,000, they require a minimum of 2 quotes. I think you do not need to amend the motion.
Additional conversation, discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Bagerly. Maskey.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. The rest of our items were discussion items. Our first one was to review the 2018 audit presentation. David Early, the auditor with Westberg and Ishans, presented the 2018 audit to the committee. He noted that since 2014, the city has been spending down fund balances in the general fund and capital improvements fund. As of 2018, the fund balance was approximately 80% of the 2019 budgeted expenditures. Other items reviewed were the general fund balance classifications of $166,609 of non-spendable and $12,857,239 of committed, the fund balance of the community investment fund, the government activities, outstanding bonds, the wastewater treatment fund revenues, expenditures and operating income, investments maturity, and a summary of the budgeted overages and the governance communication letter. All of those documents are attached. Items pointed out in the governance letter for future discussion were the level of budgetary control and the process for amendments, fund balance policy action and investment policy action to specifically address interest rate risk. These items will be discussed and addressed at future meetings when the policies and budget are reviewed. Our next item was to review the fund balance policy. The city fund balance policy was submitted to the committee for their annual review. Since the committee procedure is to receive the policy documents at one meeting for action at a future meeting, this policy will be placed on a future agenda for any committee proposed revisions. Our next item was to review the mayor's 2020 budget. Staff reviewed the mayor's 2020 proposed budget PowerPoint presentation, as well as all the fund recap sheets which contained fund descriptions and totals of fund balances, revenues, and expenditures, not only for the proposed 2020 year, but also for the current year budget and the 2-year actuals as well. Also discussed was the upcoming special meeting on Thursday, September 26th, where the full council will be invited to set the preliminary levy. Our next item just was the meeting calendar. We reviewed the upcoming special dates that were pointed out on Thursday, September 26th, with the full council invited to discuss the preliminary tax levy, and Thursday, November 21st, again, when the full city council and mayor are invited to discuss final recommended budgets to be presented to the Truth in Taxation hearing set for December 2nd at 7:01 p.m. Also mentioned was that the committee will be reviewing sections of the proposed budgets at all future meetings until the November 21st meeting. And we will be reviewing that schedule and setting additional special meetings if requested at our committee meeting this week. There was no further business to come before the committee, and we adjourned at 6:50 p.m. And I would enter a motion to approve the minutes now.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the minutes of the regular committee discussion. I have a couple of questions. Under the review of the mayor's 2020 budget, it states that at your meeting on Thursday, September 26th, that the full council will be invited to set the preliminary levy. Does that mean to discuss the preliminary levy?
You should have read to set a motion to approve the preliminary levy at the September 30th meeting, which we've already done.
Sure. And then the other thing is that on the audit presentation,
Yes.
and generally that has come before council, and will that come before council again, or is that only going to vote committee this year?
I will defer to that.
Do we know if that's going to come to full council?
I would say, or I'd ask the question to the finance director, what have we done in the past? I know we had a new discussion, you said it goes, to, you know, it gets reviewed by the finance committee.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the past couple of years, the auditor has come, and that's primarily due to the work session format versus the committee structure. He's certainly more than willing to come to the full council if that's the council's desire.
And then in the past, that the auditor has contacted the mayor for comments in regards to the audit, and that was not done this year either. So is that a new procedure? Is someone else in the council being asked that question?
I'm not aware of any questions from the auditor, to the mayor.
So in the past, I was always asked to give an opinion, and I had a series of questions, and I just thought maybe with the new committee structure would change things. So, but I wasn't aware of it. So. Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded to file the minutes as presented. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion is carried. Next, we have Labor Relations Committee for September 23rd. Got that going to the got that going to the labor or HR director, is that right? That's what my notes say.
Yes.
We're not going to, I don't know.
Well, I think the chairman of the labor committee would initiate the conversation.
Samaski, all right. Charting new territory.
It's all good. We met on September 23rd, as you stated. We did have public comment, but our first item was about, as promised, we have the employee education program policy. Told you that was coming back. I can give you a quick synopsis, but I would imagine I can give that to the city administrator or refer that to the HR director. But I can tell you, we have an antiquated policy, and what we did is we examined that and we went with a 75% reimbursement, which it already was, added to the extension to books of 75%. Did solidify that that needs to be approved by the department head and then by the city administrator. You must pass that class to be reimbursed at the end of the time frame. And it must be relevant to the work that you're doing in your area. Beyond that, if you'd like to add something, I think that takes care of it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that additional information first. And I would introduce that motion that we adopt the employee educational program policy as amended.
Second. Motion made and seconded to adopt the employee personnel policy. I'm sorry, the Willmar Employee Education Program policy as amended. Discussion. Councilmember Nelson.
I asked the question of tuition versus training and how it was budgeted for, and that I'm great with the tuition program. That's not what I meant, but just wondering if there's room in the budget for both the difference between classes and formal classes and training. And so, is it on a department by department, or how does that work?
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, each department is responsible for their employees that would access the tuition reimbursement program. I would anticipate that since the program is currently in effect, primarily with the basic information already, that after adoption, that it's not going to appreciably be a lot of people running to their supervisor to say, sign me up, okay? I think you'll see the same. Some people will avail themselves of this program, and some may not. So I don't see, a tremendous amount of money being used for this reimbursement program because it already exists, and there are a few people that have done this. As far as the normal training, that will go on just as before. So one department may have 2 people going, and the rest of the departments have nobody going. That's just part of their budget. And in the end of the year, if they're, let's say the fire department budget doesn't get exceeded, but within the department, they've got some line items that some didn't spend as much, and the next line item overspent a little bit. That's to me, that's acceptable. The overall fire department budget, didn't go over. So, given that the program already exists, I think we'll see the same amount of usage, which is not real excessive, to be quite honest. So, yes, training will go on just as usual, and we'll highlight this for the employees that they can remind themselves that this is available to them, and maybe there will be some additional interest. We'll see that in the future, and then we'll adjust budgets as needed as time goes by.
Yeah, I think traditionally what's happened on the required training comes under the training budget. So when you look at the budget and you look under that line item, I don't know what number it is, but there's an actual code for training. So those individual departments would still do that the same way they always have. This was always handled under the city administrator's office, and then when it was approved, then it came underneath the individual department director's purview of where they're going to pay for it. So, and I think this is just formalizing that process the way it looks to me. So I agree with you that this is a good policy. Additional discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion is carried. Councilmember Nesky.
The next item was the employee personnel policy, the 8th section. If I were to give my 2 cents about to summarize what we did, most of these are the standard ones, and this is what prompted us to basically say in the future or at the end of this process we're going to have most of these online, because most of these leaves and requests for these are all in state statute. However, we do have a maximum leave without pay. We currently have a year in ours, and there's a recommendation moved it to 30 days because the previous policy was before we had ADA and FMLA protections, and now that we do, many of those things don't need to be in there, so it was recommended to move it to 30 days. Other than that, the changes were minimal, but I would defer to the city administrator if he has any additional comments about section 8.
If our human resource director has anything to add to be more specific, or if there's any questions, I would say Ms. Beckman can handle the questions.
I did have one thing to add that I changed from the FMLA policy from when we met as a committee. Nothing major, but on page 2, after discussion, the city administrator and I decided we should calculate the leave year based on a rolling backward basis rather than a looking forward basis. So I just wanted to point that out. That is a change from what the committee approved. And that does guarantee that in any consecutive 12-month period, an employee can't take more than 12 weeks if you have the rolling requirement rather than a set date. So that is the calculation we wanted to recommend going forward.
In explanation.
I would move the approval of section 8 of the employee personnel policy.
Second. Motion made and seconded. On the amendment that Ms. Beckman just talked about, was that written by the city labor attorney?
There are 3 options to set the policy up: looking forward, looking backward, or put it on a calendar year. Calendar year doesn't usually get accepted because you can take the last 12 weeks of one year and the first 12 weeks of the next year. It's in 2 separate years, and you in essence got 24 weeks off. That's not the one usually selected. The one that is typically accepted is the rolling looking backwards. So when somebody comes in and requests a leave, you look back 12 months and see if they used any leave. If they didn't, they can have 12 weeks. Now, if they used a day, 10 months ago, then they can only, in that 12 months period, it might be February to February or March to March or whatever, period that is. You subtract what they've already used from the 12 weeks, and that's what they can use going forward. It's the easiest way to look at it. Going forward, if you say you can take some days, how do you look in the future, know when you're going to take those lead days off, how many you're gonna take and when you're gonna take, nobody knows that. So it's just easier to look backwards. Have you used any? Yes, subtracted from 12 weeks. This is what you have available.
Okay.
And that's right out of the League of Minnesota Cities handbook. They list those options that, as I stated, normally the one is looking backwards.
I know that this has been a contentious item in the past, and so that's why I bring it up, because I remember being in negotiation sessions where this has been a hotly debated issue, so that's why I'm asking the question. Motion's on the table, and it's been seconded, additional discussion. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion does carry. Councilmember Neske.
We then examined section 9 of the employee personnel policy, and you'll see those coming at a future date. And our last item, we did a labor negotiation strategy under Minnesota statute Rule 13D.03 subdivision 1B, and we were in closed session, and that was the end of our meeting. And with that, I would make a motion to file the labor relations committee minutes.
Second. Motion made and seconded, file labor committee minutes. Discussion. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion does carry. Next, we have the approval of the Civic Center special event on sale liquor. Ms. Thompson.
I will take that.
I'm sorry.
It's
I apologize. I'm going by my paper here. We've got to fix it.
Well, you were giving me all the other ones. So.
Exactly right.
So I finally have an easy one, and
take it away.
Ask me. I would recommend that we authorize the Civic Center Arena special on-sale liquor license holder permit, so that they can sell alcohol during the hockey season. I believe this is an extension of something that they've done in the past.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve. This is liquor, so it takes roll call, although it is a simple motion. Roll call.
Councilmember Davis. Aye. Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson. Aye. Fagerly.
Aye.
Neske.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That motion passed. Motion passes. Okay, next we have city council member announcements. Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the fire department has something going on tomorrow. Fire chief. Talk about that.
Chief Hansen? Administrator Grampus. Can Chief Hansen talk about that?
Big doings at the fire station.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that is correct. Tomorrow, we have our 14th annual story time at the fire station. It begins at 5 p.m., goes till about 7 or so, along with the fire department. Lifelink will be there with the helicopter, sheriff's department, police department, ambulance. All those people will be there for Fire Prevention Week. And for those of you that don't know about story time, it's a partnership between the early childhood of the Willmar Fire Department, where the firefighters read a book to the early childhood and families that show up. It is open to the public. There is free food for the first 700 people. So weather is going to be good tomorrow, so we're excited.
Thank you. Councilmember Askew. Yes. Councilmember Schwantes.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Pass.
Councilmember Osmus.
Pass, go Twins.
Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you. The only one that I have, I think, on our calendar, October 12th, is the Touch a Truck event, and I believe that's downtown Willmar, and looking forward to hopefully a good turnout and some cool equipment for our kids to come downtown and hang out for a while.
Councilmember Nelson. Okay, in the past, there was an announcement of council committee meeting dates, and I would like to go back to that procedure to where we announce those so that all council members are aware of any meetings that will be coming up. Either that would be a committee meeting or if the council as a whole should attend a meeting. This is just to try to facilitate open communication and so everybody knows when everybody's meeting. I had talked to the administrator in regards to this and also to Ms. Summers. And what ends up happening is sometimes the minutes or the agendas aren't posted until the evening before the meeting. And then those of us that, or those of you that work during the day, you don't get a chance to see it because the agenda's not up yet. So we just thought we'd go back to announcing the meetings ahead of time so that all council members are aware of when those meetings are happening. So if you don't have the information tonight, that's fine. But in future meetings, if you're a committee chair, if you could have that information, that'd be helpful. Councilmember Nesky, yes.
October 14th, 28th, Labor will be meeting at 6:15.
Okay, finance?
We are meeting this Thursday, October 10th, at 5:15.
Councilmember Palmer?
Public Works, Public Safety will be meeting Wednesday, October 9th at 5:15.
Councilmember Hager?
Community Development, next Monday, the 14th at 5:15.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. With that, we'll go into closed session. The agenda for this meeting is labor negotiation strategy under Minnesota statute section 13B.03, subdivision 1, clause B as in boy. Portion of this meeting will be closed pursuant to such statute upon a duly appointed motion of the city council. I will now entertain a motion to close this portion of the meeting.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of going to closed session? Those opposed? Okay. Council will now be in closed session. The time is 8:51 p.m. Only council, only the city council, and its authorized representatives may be in attendance. If you're not a part of that, please leave.